Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of May the Assassin from the Acolyte. Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. A couple of weeks ago we found the first wave of Black Series 6-inch figures from the Acolyte here in New Zealand. We picked up all 6. I've opened up 4 of them so far, the Jedi characters. I just have May and her sister Osha, the twins, left to unbox. It was a little bit of a coin flip between which 2 I wanted to unbox first, but I decided to go with May in her assassin outfit because her purple soft goods robes hides a lot of the costume details underneath. I'm really keen to check out those. We see May in her assassin disguise quite heavily in the trailers, so I am quite familiar with her costumes. Osha was kept a little bit more of a secret, so I'm less familiar with her outfit, but I'm really excited to open this one up and get her on display with my Black Series Master Indara from that first episode. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll open up the box, we'll get the figure out and go over all of the details, but first let's take one last look at the packaging. This first wave of Black Series 6-inch figures from the Acolyte was the debut of a new packaging style from Hasbro. And while I am quite nostalgic for that side angle range that we've had recently, I do really like this new one. I think I prefer it now that I've actually had a few examples in my collection. We've got a nice rectangular shape with this black border around the large front window. We've got the Black Series logo at the top and a color accent stripe underneath the window. For the Acolyte series, it is an interesting orangey red there. We used to have the character name underneath, but now we have the character names down the side here. This one reads May Assassin, and she is number 06 from the line. We've got 6 figures. She is the last one in the set. The windows here on this new style of packaging are slightly taller and wider than the older boxes, so we get a better view of the figures inside. We've also got just a little bit more breathing room for the accessories. I think it's kind of interesting that for May, she has her 4 throwing knives kind of spaced around her. I thought this was a little bit interesting. I personally thought that maybe sort of cluster them together. They look perhaps a little bit odd, sort of spaced down here, but I know they're trying to sort of fill the area around the figure so it doesn't look so empty. We also have her removable mask accessory. I'm really hoping that won't be too hard to fit over her face. Definitely keen to try that one out. Down the side, we still have the really nice side art of the characters that form that large sort of mosaic picture when you line them all up. We can see the artwork here of May. She is wearing her mask in this version of the artwork with her hood up, holding one of her throwing knives. It fades down into the accent color at the bottom, which again reads May Assassin. There, she does have quite a few outfits in the show. It'll be interesting to see how long we have to wait to get a different version of May in the Black Series line. Moving on to the back, we again have that artwork here, a little bit zoomed in, a little bit cropped off, and that accent color stripe continues across the back, 06 from the Acolyte series. We have a little bit of a blurb, but as with other figures from the Acolyte range, this is about the series, not the character that we have featured here. It reads, at the end of the High Republic era, a former Padawan reunites with her Jedi Master to investigate a series of crimes, but the forces they confront turn out to be far more sinister and personal than anticipated. So very high level, really trying to avoid spoilers when they were making this packaging in the factories there. The rest of the text on the back is just warning, copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff there. The window from the front does wrap around here on the left, but unlike previous versions, there is no window at the top here. Personally, I always found that window at the top just seemed to attract a lot of dust, and I didn't like having to kind of try and get that out. It does make the figures a little bit darker, but this overall box, if you can see in the cross section, it is actually made from corrugated cardboard, so it has a really sturdy, almost kind of like a book feel because of its rectangular shape. They look great when you get them all lined up on your shelf if you like to keep them boxed, but even if you open them up, we can still line them up to get that fabulous mosaic artwork for your displays. Personally, I do like to keep all of my packaging for my Star Wars figures figures, so I like the fact that we can still align them up. Kind of makes an interesting sort of backdrop if you have the display space to put your figures in front of their boxes. So just for a little bit of comparison, I'll just move that one over. I have one of the older side angle Black Series figures here. I have Obi-Wan from the Obi-Wan series. The design on the back is pretty much the same. We can see the accent stripe, the art, the numbering, all of that kind of stuff, the blurbs in the different languages. We have a slightly different hanger. We have a clear one like that. I was never a fan of these black plastic ones. They often tended to get caught and broken in our local toy stores, and you can also see the plastic window that just always seemed to attract a lot of dust. It was always a little bit tricky to try and make that one clean. We still have the angles going around the side, so we get in a little bit of light with that window wrapping around. One thing that is different if you have unboxed any of these ones, the window on the front of these boxes is attached to the box itself. When you slide the plastic tray from these ones, the plastic is entirely removable, so we have just sort of an open window if you take the plastic out. The front window here is attached to the box, so we just slide out that one inner tray, and we also have a printed backdrop inside. It's very red, but there is sort of a subtle scene behind May and all of the figures from the Acolyte. They're all unique, different backdrops for each different characters. These ones, we generally just had a pretty plain one. In behind Obi-Wan, it's just white. There isn't any image there. So I really feel like Hasbro listened to the collectors that were upset during that plastic-free packaging era about wanting a nice presentation for those fans that like to keep their figures boxed. These ones, they look really nice and sharp. The straight edges means that they line up on display shelves really nicely, and we now have a printed backdrop there as well. Just kind of adds really to the overall presentation. While I am very nostalgic for this old side angle, I'm certainly going to be keeping a few boxed examples for my collection. I'm really liking this new one, and I'm really happy that Hasbro has changed finally. So with all of the packaging looked at, let's open it up. As usual, I'm going to open this box up from the underside, and you can see that Hasbro does intend for this to be the opening because we have this cutout here so that we can sort of grab there with your thumb and pull on this lower flap. Again, because we have this thicker cardboard, I like that we've got this cutout. It makes opening them up a lot easier. I'm just going to flip it around. I do find the back red insert on these figures is a little bit tricky to get back in, so I'm not going to pull it out. I'm just going to get my finger under the tray here. And we can see that once I slide that out, you can see the printed backdrop in behind the figure. We have a lot of red spooky trees there, and that plastic window stays attached to the box. So now we can see we have May in her assassin gear out of the packaging. Her little throwing knives are all sellotaped in, so I'm going to have to cut a lot of tape to get her out. And unlike the Jedi characters, her soft goods cloak isn't sort of inserted through the back of the tray. Most of the Jedi characters, there was a slot here in the back where their robe was kept sort of tucked behind the character. Hers is all fully lying in the tray, so let's hope it's not too creased. Definitely keen to get her out and check out all of these details. So now I have May and the accessories out of the packaging, so we can go over all of the details. And as you can see, she stands up really well. I didn't need to tweak her articulation at all to get her to stand up, which I really quite like. I do notice just with her standing here, before I get into the details, I can actually see, and I've got to get the right angle, I can actually see daylight through the articulation at her elbow. So I'm hoping I can just catch it there. There's a gap through the articulation, so I'm hoping that means that she'll still be able to bend her elbow. I think that that's kind of a little bit concerning. I haven't seen that before. Probably just a minor little variation in the production line. But the first thing that I want to really look at is the soft goods. I love the soft goods on Black Series figures. The larger scale just means that fabric flows really nicely compared to, sometimes it looks a little bit sort of big and out of scale in the 3.75 inch line. And this is really quite different. I thought it might be made from sort of a similar fabrics to the Jedi robes from the other Acolyte figures. So I'm just going to quickly grab another one. I have here Master and Dark because these two kind of go together. I'm certainly going to have them displayed beside each other. So for the Jedi robes, they were all sewn in the same style from slightly different colored fabrics. And they are sort of a thicker polyester fabric, all sewn very nicely, but the hoods were all tacked down here in the back. You can't, unless case you sort of want to do some customizing, cut those stitches out. You can kind of see with the way that they are sort of cut and sewn, they're really designed to sort of sit open and folded over the shoulders. I love the draping, but it is perhaps a little bit of a shame for people to like to create scenes. You can't put the hoods up. They are very big. There's no wire or any sort of way to pose the hoods up. So that's why I thought it was really interesting when I saw she's going to sit there in the back. The May figure, we can see that this is a much thinner fabric. It's very thin. You can kind of see light through it here. It's almost like a very thin t-shirt fabric, more like a cotton shirt. These ones are sort of a thicker polyester, comparing them together. And this one has the most amazingly stitched hood. And as you can see, this is how the hood came out of the packaging. We've got some stitches here at the shoulders to kind of keep it really nice and folded down over her shoulders. We get this lovely sort of fold here in the front. And it is also very well stitched across the back here as well. So definitely fitting for her that we've got this hood up. She's kind of shrouded in mystery with her purple robe. I like it when they do just a little bit of extra work to make the soft goods really fit in the scale, fits the figure. Just straight out of the box. She looks amazing. From the back, you can see we had just a little bit of compression around the shoes. We can see just a little bit of shaping here. I'm sure this will sort of loosen out with time. You can stretch t-shirt fabric, you know, if you sort of put too much pressure on it, but it is in the back. But yeah, we can just see just a little bit of that sort of boot and leg shape there sort of pressed into the fabric. I'm hoping that will just sort of loosen up with time now that she's out of her packaging. And we can pull it back and finally see more of the costume details underneath. So just want to sort of finish going over the soft goods, then I'm going to take this off so we can really see all of the details underneath, because when it was in the box, the way that it was sort of folded over the front, it really did hide. We can close it all the way up. So there aren't any closures or anything at the front, but if you sort of hold it or have it sort of resting there, she can be completely covered. There is enough fabric to completely cover her down the front. So again, if you like to customize, you could put some stitches in here or perhaps some very thin glue and completely seal that up if you really want to. I just really like the way that it's draping over the head. That's always such the tricky part. A lot of soft goods for Star Wars action figures often involve cloaks, robes, things with a hood, and it just looks odd if you're just kind of sitting there like a bubble. Emperor Palpatine is a prime example. He has a very specific shape, the way that his hood sort of sits so that you just see like his nose and chin when he's talking. And if it kind of sits up, you know, Jawas have different hoods, Jedi have different hoods, they've all got to sit right. And I really like the way that this is sitting here. The thinner fabric just means that they can get sort of a smaller scale with all the stitches and folds here. And I really like that. Of course, this is sleeveless. The edges of this fabric are cut. And generally speaking, you know, if you want your clothes to last, you will, you know, hem and edge the raw fabric. We generally, for me, I don't want to handle soft goods too much because you can kind of rough up and sort of fuzzy the edges. This is cut so lovely and sharp. It's sewn really nicely across the edges here. It just looks really nice. So I'm going to be careful with it. So for the articulation checking, I'm going to take it off, but I like how it comes to the floor. You can see that it's just touching the floor all around. It's a pretty even hemline as well. We can see that it is perfectly matched up. Sometimes you get sections that are slightly longer or shorter than the one sewn next to it. That's always a little bit frustrating. And yes, we've got all the raw edges, including at the front of the hood here. But if you sew things over, you kind of stiffen them and you don't get quite the same drape, which would throw off the scale. And I really like the color, the fabric choice, and the construction for this soft goods cloak. This is where it's at. I love this. It's really great. So let's pull her arms back a little bit so we can remove her cloak. That arm is just a little bit stiff. And so we can take off her soft goods robe here. I'm just going to pop it there in the back. We can move Master Andara out of the way. And now we can take a look at the full sculpting and details of May in her assassin outfit. So of course, like usual, I'm going to start from the top. So from the front, she was wearing the hood up. We could see the front of her very distinctive braids here. We've got an ombre paint color where it's lighter here at the ends, moving up to a darker color here at the top. And something that was completely hidden is just how far back they go at the back. It's kind of not that common to have such long hair for Star Wars characters. If I think about, you know, even Princess Leia, she has very long hair, but she very rarely wears it all the way down. The Ewok village Leia, where she's got all her beautiful hair hanging down, is one of the few examples where we have a Star Wars character with hair that hangs that low. So of course, they've got to be accurate to the character, but that may affect how well we can turn the head around, because this is all one piece here. So of course, when we come to bangs or fringes, I do like it when Hasbro sculpts the hair as a separate piece. We do get a little bit of a gap there, just some really nice sort of detail work. So it doesn't feel like it's all just sculpted as part of her face. And of course, being this long in the back, it needs to be a separate component. I just really like the ombre effect there. It's a little bit more of a solid plastic look here in the back. And of course, the color gradient starts to sort of really transition around here, but that does line up with her hair, because of course, if you've seen the show, it's not too much of a spoiler, she does cut her braids. So perhaps in a future version of May, we will get her in her different look when her braids have been cut off here in the back. But I really like the ombre effect. It was so hidden. I thought I could sort of see it here across these ones here in the front with the soft goods cloak on there, but that's really nice. Some really nice sculpting all over. They are fairly flexible, so I might be able to turn her. I can sort of see, you can sort of pull them quite away from the body, and then we'll be able to sort of, I feel like there's like a subtle curve there just to sort of follow the shoulders a little bit, especially when I sort of pull the head in. Fits really nice close to the body too. That's quite nice and thin as well. Really like the scale of that. So let's just do a quick little check. Oh, I can kind of get them over the shoulder there a little bit. Kind of wants to stick about there, but I generally think we're probably not going to turn the head too much further around. I can. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I wasn't sure whether we just kind of get to there and stop. So it does kind of twist them a little bit, and I probably wouldn't keep them like that for a long-term pose, but you can turn the head. That's really interesting. I thought perhaps they might be rubbery enough. You can see how it's kind of split into sections. It's not all solid. I really like that. Cool. A detail that's completely hidden by the soft goods robe that you're only going to see when you open it up. So she has all this kind of interesting sort of chainmail detail that is just absolutely fascinating to see on this figure up close now. So it's so fine. I keep wanting to bring it closer to the camera. We've got all of this texture here that's accented with a bit of a silver, and then we've got sort of black patches of the undergarments, I think, showing through underneath there. And then on this side, we can see again the texture sculpted. I can sort of feel it with my fingernail, accented in silver with the black of the sort of sleeves underneath showing through. And she has this really interesting armor plate. I can just see some of sort of the chainmail details that are sculpted. It's not technically underneath, it would be on the original costume, but Hasbro has just included a little bit there at the sides, on both sides. I can just make that out there. It's got, I don't think it's accented with silver. It's just a black on black, but it does kind of match up to the rest there. And then we've got this really interesting sort of chest plate here. Now this does have a very dark metallic silver finish to it. Now shiny plastic often tends to just shine on camera, but this is metallic and it has kind of a hammered metal sort of finish to it. You can sort of see the pebbly effect, and we've even got a couple of sort of score line scratches here as well, where something has sort of come close to her and sort of carved into the metal. We also have these sort of bamboo sections that are painted in a yellow and with sort of like a browny sort of weathering paint over the top of them there. Such a unique costume detail there. Moving on to the back, it's just plain black under her hair. It's just sort of a plastic. I don't know if that's because that's what it looks like on the original costume, because of course it is very covered by her hair and her soft goods robes, or there was simply not enough information and Hasbro's just gone with a plain black shiny plastic base. If it was textured, it might just sort of add a little bit more extra. You can kind of see it just kind of looks like a blank action figure, but if that is the original costume detail, or perhaps Hasbro made that choice because it will be covered by her hair. Of course, if you want to do customizing, that might be a little bit weird, but I'm going to have her hair covering that, so it's just shiny black plastic. I thought it might have been like this kind of color or texture, kind of like an armored back plate or something like that. Interesting that it is just a shiny black plastic. We can see that it is kind of intended, if I just get her arm up, it kind of connects here in the back. So I thought maybe this detail would just continue round. I really do have to sort of watch those episodes again and take a closer look at her costume during fight scenes. I think the robe would probably cover it. We can see that there is a little bit of sort of a black robe around her torso. If I use that articulation point to kind of lean her back a little bit, we've got a bit of a fabric sculpting here. We've sort of got crease lines, and that torso section also continues through to the back here. Again, a bit more just of a plain black plastic here in the back. We don't have that same sort of rippled sculpting that we have here on the front. It's very tight. If we look down to her robe sections, we sort of have the sort of the, I know there's a name for it, and my brain always wants to sort of think of it as sort of like, it's sort of gathered, like when you grab around a paper bag. And we get the sort of gathering of her skirt sections here above her belt, and they are sculpted sort of away from the body, which is kind of, if I get her arm out of the way, going to hit on her chest here in the front. So she doesn't lean down very far, goes to about there, and then her chest plate is hitting on the top of her skirt section that's sculpted there. Not as much on this side, it's tucked a little bit more round to the back. But again, costume details that Hasbro has to work around. I like the skirt. It's kind of one big section of plastic. Now, generally speaking, we often have, when there are large components, if I just move her arms out of the way, we often have like a split or something down the side, especially say like on the plastic lower sections of Jedi tunics. We often have a split up the side that may not exist on the original costume. This version of May doesn't have a split in the side of her skirt. The plastic piece wraps all the way around, no split in the back, and it comes all the way around to the front here. This section is separate. It's not sort of a complete skirt. So this side might be a little bit more limited in the posability of her left leg. We're probably going to get a little bit more posability with her right leg, because I can see all the way up to the articulation there at the hip with this sort of chainmail section. Again, it's a different, sort of similar in terms of the sculpting texture. We can see all of the sort of rings and some of the sort of fabric or textile underneath. And we've got a little bit of a silver accent to really highlight the sections that are supposed to be sort of chainmail rings, not on the sections showing through, but we've got it in the sort of burgundy color that is used for the skirt rather than the black and silver for the tunic, the upper parts. She's got black sort of wrappings on her forearms. She is not wearing any kind of gloves. We've just got a little bit of fabric around at the wrist going close to the thumbs, but we've got a good skin tone to match her face there as well. The articulation is pretty hidden, but then black on black it often is. You can just sort of see it there. I'm finding the joints on these ones a little bit stiff. I can just kind of get that one up there. This arm in particular is very stiff. I'm just getting her arms up out of the way so we can really see the skirt detail. She's got a really interesting belt, quite wide. And I know wide belts do affect the sort of posability through the middle of action figures as well. We've got a couple of sort of rings on either side. They don't, I'm trying to see under the light. I don't know if they have a paint. I don't know if they're just catching the light or whether they are accented with silver. There, I can see that they are raised, and then they've just got straps that kind of go through to a flatter section there in the back. I do really like the deep folds in the sculpting of the skirt section. I love that. Just so much better than just a flat fabric. It's really nice. Just interesting that they didn't hide a split in here. think that's really interesting. But I do like that they are a bit sort of little rubbery, but no split in the side. That's really going to affect how well I can sort of move. Now, she's got, I was wondering about this. Her accessories are little throwing knives. She appears to have a holster on her thigh tucked under here, but it doesn't actually look like, I'm going to have to test that. I can see a tiny split, like at the top. I might be able to get those in there. That's really small, and it's kind of a shame that it's not on this leg because I can get into there. I'm a little bit worried that if I try and get them in, if I'm successful, if this is actually a holster for her to put them in, I might not get them out. And I know that that is going to be, you know, the costume designer. Hasbro's not like, we're going to put the holster in the worst spot to put it on, not over here. You know, she obviously has to reach down to her left side, but that you can sort of see the sculpting on it. It has these lines like she's going to fit 4 throwing knives in there. The accessories are really tiny. I'm very keen to check those out. I'm just a little bit worried about how well those are going to fit in there. So we can see by playing with the plastic, I'm a little worried. I'm just really finagling this one all over the place. Her pants and boots are just plain black. No paint work here. There is a section here where it's kind of a little bit glossy, and then I have a sort of a matte finish effect, and I don't know if that's intentional or just an interesting change in the finish of that figure. You can kind of see this section here is different at the top. We've got some sculpting there on the pants. I always like the way that the sculpting sort of hides the knee articulation. And then we have these black boots. They have 3 circles, kind of slightly recessed going down on the outside. We can see that on this boot here as well. And there is a really subtle sort of leather texture to it. A little bit of a toe cap, but it is the same black. And we've got ankle articulation very well hidden in the boot sculpting there. Sort of follows the line around the ankle. Really keen to check out the articulation of this one and whether those little accessories are actually designed to fit into that leg holster. The holster is, I can barely get, can I move that? I think, oh, okay, it's actually attached. I could swivel that round to the front so I can see it better there. This is actually, you can just kind of see me moving it. Ah, okay, so that might be how I'm going to get those in and out, because this is absolutely in the way. That can move, and it's got these little straps going around the thigh. Really hard to see because it's black on black in shadow, but I'm hoping you can see that rubbery holster there for her knives attached to her thigh. It's obviously worn more on her outer hip, but I've just moved it around to show it a little bit better, and also because I want to see if she can actually put those accessories in there, because they are tiny, and I know if I don't, I like when figures can hold their accessories, so I don't need to lose them or store them somewhere where I'm going to forget where I put them. I like when they can hold their accessories or have them in a holster or something like that, so I can have my figures complete and all together. So some really cool costume details. I know it's got to be tricky for Hasbro to translate some of these new complicated, you know, characters into figures, and it's really fun just having a look at it now that it's all out of the box with the robe off. I really like the way that that skirt hangs. It's got just sort of a fun asymmetrical hem, the deep grooves there, and I really like the different textures that Hasbro can do in this sculpting, especially on the Black Series where you get to play with scale a little bit more compared to the smaller action figures. We've got the different finishes there, and just the way that this looks like a different fabric to this and to the boots. Looks really nice. Some really cool costume details here for May in her assassin look. So let's continue with the articulation. There is one final sort of costume detail point here. She's got sort of like a black fabric sort of neckline piece here, a collar, a scarf that is around her neck. And you can kind of see, if I pull it up there, it is not attached to the chest, it is around the neck. And while I usually go straight into the articulation, I'm just going to grab the accessory, because I thought this was a mask based in the box, that it was kind of going to sit on her face. But you can see we're going to have to pop her head off to put this on. which always makes me nervous. I don't like pulling heads off. I know for helmeted characters like Mandalorians, you get a better accuracy and scale of the helmet if you pop it off as a separate swappable part rather than a helmet fitting over the head. But I'm going to have to pull her head off if I want to put this accessory on. So you can see it's kind of like a scarf worn around the neck, but this one is pulled up. So it's not really clipping on over the face like I thought it was. I thought it was just kind of be something that's going to sort of hold with tension, maybe kind of go in under her braids and kind of hold on over her face. But I guess I have to take this section off and take her head off. I was kind of hoping there might be like a split in the back of this accessory so you can sort of pull it out from the front and then pop this around from the front, but I'm going to have to pull her head off to get this on. That always makes me anxious. I don't like swapping parts on my Black Series figures. I like that Hasbro does give us accessories. Obviously we want all the sort of options and accessories. I can take the soft goods cloak off and change her look, but I'm not a fan of pulling the actual pieces off. I recently had to take hands off a couple of figures. Hands are tiny and the attachment points are even smaller. I really don't like doing that. So let's check out her articulation. Her vest and chest armor here at the front is quite away from her arms here and her shoulders. So I'm pretty sure, okay, so this part here is part of her torso and the arm articulation point is here. So I can get her to about there and then it's going to stop. So not a complete, this one goes up a little bit higher. The shoulder piece is a little bit more tucked in there. I'm not sure why this one extends. That's got to be just part of Hasbro having to follow the accuracy of the original costume. So this arm doesn't come up quite as high as this arm here. But of course, we're going to get all the articulation. It is really nice and tight in there because we don't have any sort of large sculpted details on the shoulders. We can get a really nice tight fit of the upper arm with that articulation point there. We can see the articulation here at the elbow, the gathered fabric, black on black, it hides that all really quite nicely. We can move the arms in and out like we would expect to. She's actually got a little bit of, as I would say, a trigger finger on each hand. So we've got the sort of the top finger separate to the rest of the hands. A lot of lightsaber holders tend to have their fingers together and just their thumb to grip. But then if you hold a blaster, you often have the top finger sort of extended and separate to the lower three, which she has. We can see that top finger has a gap with the lower three and her thumb. So I'm hoping that we'll actually get a reasonable grip on her tiny throwing knives because they're a lot smaller than, say, a blaster or a lightsaber. We can see the articulation there. We can see that there is kind of a stepping point in the sculpting. She's kind of got extra wrappings here on her forearm. There is a bit of a stepping point there, and we can see it there on this side. And we've got a little bit of that black wrapping on the back of her hand, which we can see. I can move her hands there. We've got that articulation point on that one and we can turn it around. Overall, really happy with the amount of movement that I can get with her arms because of course she throws knives. We want to get her arms into some really interesting poses to really throw those knives. It's a little bit different than the sort of the classic two-handed blaster pose or a two-handed lightsaber pose that we get from a lot of characters in the Star Wars. Different kind of weapon, so of course we're going to have to do some different kinds of poses. Of course we've got that torso movement there. Oh, that was a bit of a click. Okay, very tight moving to the side. That was a very odd click sound. I'm not usually a fan of clicking sounds. I don't like the thought of breaking my action figures. She can lean back. Her hair does hit there in the back, so that's going to stop a little bit there in the back. It is rubbery. If I tip her head forward, we can get a little bit more of a lean there. So her hair hangs free, but there's just not a lot of space here between the skirt details and her chest guard. So we're not getting a lot there. It's not like sort of the torsos of stormtroopers where we've got sort of an abdomen plate there. Now, we can see the top of the thigh is actually visible in this split here. So the belt is resting quite a lot higher. So let's check out. Okay, so we can get her leg all the way out. I'm not going to be able to do that on the other side because the skirt is clearly covering that. And let's see how high she can kick to the front. I can get to there. It's pretty good considering we've got this big piece of plastic. I am creasing it a little bit here, but I can get her leg all the way up. Now, the other leg is probably not really going to go anywhere. I can get it to about there. And then we've just got a complete plastic sort of obstruction here. That's not really going to go up anywhere. I can see that holster a little bit better there. I can see those sort of attachment straps there. I can sort of move them around. You can see that one there. I can wiggle that. It's black on black, hard to see. Very interested to see that holster though. I couldn't see that, of course, when she's in the box. So really interesting. And then we'll check out her knees. I'll do this one first. Easier to get to. The skirt at the back is actually getting in the way. I can kind of, yeah, I have to bend this back, but then that's a bit odd. You can see it's really impacting on the way that her knees can go to the back. If I kind of kick her leg out to the side in the sort of split there, I can kind of get her up and then I can get the articulation there. So you just kind of got to get it out of this section a little bit to the side. It's a bit better there. So the articulation's there. We do have the limitations of the costume, which obviously is something Hasbro has to work with all the time. I can tip the toes down quite a lot, and they've got a nice movement to them. Some ankles really fight me when I'm trying to get good poses. These ones, they move backwards and forwards really nice. I feel like she's going back to her default position really well. And she stands up really nicely, even though I've been playing with her legs and ankles a lot there. So some really fun articulation there with the arms. Of course, the soft goods robe would fit over it. It's not going to impact it because it's sleeveless. It's going to have her arms fully open. So I'm hoping we can get some really good throwing knife poses. But the legs are very restricted, which is kind of interesting considering how acrobatic those fight scenes were. But I often wonder if what the decisions that Hasbro have to do either plastic skirts or decide to do like a soft goods element for perhaps this section here. Because I know they do that on some figures, not a lot though. They generally save fabrics for the robes and things like that, because this large plastic, just curious that they didn't do a split in the side like they do, or perhaps even up the back so we get a little bit more flex, because I can clearly move that front edge. I would be able to pose her legs a lot more freer if there was a split, say here. Interesting choice that they didn't do that with this particular figure. So let's move on to checking out her weapons and accessories. Just getting May to stand off to the side because I don't even know how you're supposed to pick up these tiny knives. They almost just kind of stick to your hands more than you can hold them. They are tiny and they are very light, and that one's sticking to me. I'm not even sure how well I can show them. These are so tiny. Now, best I can tell, I think they're made out of sort of like this gray translucenty plastic, because I can kind of see like a pale color here, but I don't think it's an actual hole. I think I'm just looking at the color that I can see here on the tip, and the rest of it is sort of painted black there, like a metal. They are so tiny. I'm kind of curious to see how well the action figure is going to hold these, because their hands are generally sculpted to hold much bigger weapons. We can have a look at a few others. They're so hard to pick up. You can kind of see the little holes there. Well, they're sculpted to look like holes, but I'm pretty sure I'd have to get like a tiny little sort of end of a paper clip to test to see if I can actually, I'm pretty sure that's a plastic that I'm looking at and not a gap. On this one, pretty sure that's a plastic. And again, it sort of tapers off to that paler color there. So tiny, and we have 4 of them. And then of course, as I showed earlier, we've got this sort of cowl, sort of scarf to cover her face as well. I'm going to leave that one to last because, as I mentioned, I don't like taking heads off figures. So I'm glad that her arms are quite poseable, and we can see the size of her grip there. It does look a little bit flatter. I don't know that this hand would necessarily hold a lightsaber. It does look narrower, so that's giving me hope that she's going to be able to hold a throwing knife, because honestly, if these things fall, they're getting lost on the floor. So let's see. Obviously, we're not going to have too much issue of her just like getting it into her hand. Just going to see. Is she going to drop it? Okay, that's holding in there pretty well. Okay. So I've pressed it in just a little bit so her little finger is kind of resting just on the end of the hilt, and she can sort of hold it like that. I thought when I sort of saw her on screen that perhaps Hasbro would give us like maybe one throwing knife and then sort of 3 attached together, sort of like a fan, a spread of throwing knives, so she could sort of hold them like that in one go. I'm gonna try and see if she can actually fit like a second one in her hand. I want to see. So if she's like holding, can I get a second one in there? Wow, her hand is actually really tight. I don't know if I can actually get a second one in there. I can get one in that one, same as the other one, so she can sort of hold. Awkward pose, but it's just there for demonstration. I can get that one in there. Again, pushing it through so that her little finger is resting on the end of the throwing knife seems to be a pretty good way to do that, but it's actually pretty tight. You might be able to press 2 in there, but it doesn't really want to go. I thought I might be having to put 2 in each hands just because of the scale of these tiny accessories. But yes, I'm gonna have to play around with the posing because I'm really not used to these kinds of accessories. But I like that her hands are kind of symmetrical, the same sort of pose. So if you bring them together, they look the same. Nice look there. And I'm really, really impressed that she's actually holding on to them. I'm flinging her pretty strongly, and they are staying put. So that's a big relief. I was really worried that these things were just going to fall out, they'd disappear, get lost in the dust, and just get completely lost. And I'm also kind of relieved that we have this thigh holster in here to hold them as well. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to get all 4 in there because I do actually want her to hold some, but I'm just curious to see if I can fit the other ones in there. So I've pulled it around as best I can so it is on the front of her thigh because I need at least a little bit. I don't have the tiniest hands, but I got to be able to get my fingers in there to get those in and potentially out again. You can see the sort of sculpting lines there, so let's give it a go. I've got my tiny little throwing knife. This is going to be really tricky. Okay, let's see. Can I... And I don't want to break these either. They're so thin. I got to push that one out of the way and then try and get... Just going to go in the center. Yes. Yes, they fit. Oh my gosh. So they're obviously not going to be sort of partitioned. You're just going to sort of get them in there. So I doubt you'd get all 4 because technically 1, 2, 3, 4, I can sort of see 4 lines, but they are obviously not. You've got the scale of plastic, but there I can get comfortably 2, probably even 3. Might get all 4 in there, but personally I want her to hold some. So that is really cool. I'm probably going to leave that holster on the front of her thigh so I can get at it because it is completely hidden by the skirt. It does make a little bit of a lump, you can kind of feel it, but the skirt is sitting flared out from the waist anyway. So when it's sitting there like that, I don't notice that. That is so cool. I had no idea that there was going to be a little thigh holster under there. When I saw them in the box, I'm like, what? At least you've got, you know, Ziploc bags or something to put these tiny accessories in. There's just no way. I'm glad she holds them really well, and we've even got a little spot on the figure to put them in because I thought, you know, I couldn't remember where she sort of pulls them from in the show because clearly there's nothing on her boots. We often have a lot of Star Wars characters with either sort of knives in like their gauntlet or their boots. That's often the popular place to store knives, but that's so cool. Okay, lucky last, the hood accessory for her face. Her hands look pretty good when she puts them just straight down there like that. That's nice. I never like this step, so let's just get stuck into it and let's see how easy or hard it is to pop her head off. I'm hoping. Coming off. That's very, very stiff. Okay, so a little bit of help. I finally got her head off. The little scarf section around her neck is just plain black. It's got some lovely fabric sculpting to it, and that would obviously just sort of sit around there, but that part comes off. We can see her head comes off completely there. It's got a standard ball attachment. It's cold here. I know that temperatures can affect plastic, and that's possibly why, but also just tiny little imperfections or just a little bit of extra plastic. With pulling, her head does come off. We can see the attachment point there, and now we can put the sort of hood scarf section there. So this is going to be interesting because I obviously don't want to sort of press the head down onto this, but I've got to put that in position before we put the head back on. And I really do wish that Hasbro had just done like a little slit there in the back so I could sort of pull them on and off around the neck rather than doing it this way. I know that many fans, this is their sort of preferred method. Let's see how easily I can put her head back in place. Sometimes putting it back on is easier than taking it off. Let's gotta get her arms out of the way. This arm is very, oh, it finally dropped. Okay, so you can get her to drop her things. This arm is a lot stiffer on my particular figure. It takes a little bit of pushing to get that one up. So I'm gonna see how easily I can get this on. Getting a good grip on the figure. It's going to be a stiff one again to put it back on. There we go. That was a loud snap. Okay, so it takes a little bit of adjustment, but there we go. So I can put her hands down now as well so we can get a better look at her face. So it's going to take just a little bit of adjustment. It does want to, on my one, sit underneath her braids here at the side. So it does kind of tuck into her braids here. I just kind of caught underneath. I wonder if I can pull those out just to get them. There we go. Okay, so it's going to free float a little bit, so you can kind of adjust there to kind of get the peak of the nose is the main point that I want, to kind of have that lined up there with her nose. It sits down around on her chest very nicely there as well. I don't see the neck through there. It's very, very nice and tight, hiding her face like it does on the show and on the artwork. You can kind of see, like, obviously I can sort of move it around a little bit, but very nice. It still stresses me out. I don't like taking the heads off. I'm never sure if I'm going to break something when you have to exert that much force to take them off and on. And to be honest, I don't know which way I actually like this. We do see her with her mask on in the show. But then you're hiding a lot of the cool sculpting there as well. I really do like the paintwork on Black Series figures, that new digital printing. We just get the most fantastic fine detail and the likenesses, the sculpting of the face. I don't know, it looks pretty cool. Probably when I put her soft goods cloak back on, it might just give an overall cool feeling with this mask on. So let's get her cloak back on. Here is May, complete in her assassin disguise from the Black Series line. She has her alternate sort of face covering there, her soft goods robe on, and she's even holding two of her sort of assassin throwing knives there. There was a lot of detail to go over on this figure. I know this was a bit of a longer one. There's some really interesting details to go over. I didn't know that there was going to be a holster to hold the other two throwing knife accessories. So all in all, the only thing that I have to really store away is the alternate little sort of neck scarf bit there. I'm probably going to store that one in the box. I love this figure. The detail, the colors, the accessories. That was really fun. And now I can finally pose her with the Master and Dara figure, because of course these two have that incredible fight scene that we saw in the trailers and is in that first episode. So now I can put these two together. I think they look really cool. You can see the height difference here as well, Master and Dara being a little bit taller, of course, because May and Osha are younger there as well. So really cool. I'm really enjoying the Black Series line of figures from the Acolyte. Some really interesting details. I had so much fun opening up the High Republic era Jedi costumes. A lot of fun details there. But of course, there are some other really new and unique costumes and characters from the other parts of the show. Obviously, every fan is wanting a Khmer / the Stranger figure. It's a real shame that Hasbro hasn't even announced this as a pipeline figure. No figures. We only have that really cool Black Series 1:1 scale helmet that they have revealed for the Stranger. I think think that one looks really cool. But of course, primarily, I'm an action figure collector. I want the big bad character from the show to add to my action figure collections in both 3.75 inch and 6-inch scale. And of course, I need to put him alongside these other wonderful Black Series figures. I want more characters from the show. We know we've got a couple more coming for both lines, but yeah, I need the Stranger. I think it's going to look really cool, especially with the details that I can see on these figures already. This was a fun unboxing. There was so many great details. I absolutely love the soft goods robes. I know it's kind of funny that it's not plastic. It's just the kind of additional accessory over the top, but it really does make this figure, even though it hides a bit of the details. It's kind of interesting. There wasn't much in the way of chest details on the back. It's all very hidden by the braids and the hair sculpting, and of course the robes do cover that again as well. But I like that we've got the options because they've fully sculpted all of her hair and everything in the back, and the robe detail, kind of interesting. Hasbro didn't put a split. That does limit the articulation at the lower legs, but at least we do get some really good posability in the arms because of course she's doing a lot of knife throwing there. So overall, this was a fun adventure. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure from the Acolyte and had a lot of fun at checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also unboxed the Master Indara figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.